It is ankle joint or articulatio talocruralis between bones of the leg and talus. This joint is simple or compound? Tell me, please. Compound, of course, because it is talus, it is tibia and fibula. That is why it is compound joint. Shape of the joint, look here, that is trochlea, that is why it is hinge joint. Hinge joint usually uniaxial, and this joint is uniaxial. It is uniaxial, we can make flexion and extension. If you move foot upward, it is
dorsiflexion.
no, you are right, it is dorsiflexion, but if you speak about flexion or extension, it is extension. And if you move foot downward, it is flexion. If you compare with the hand, where is here flexion? If we move hand in palmar, that is palmar surface, yes? In palmar surface, that is flexion. In dorsal surface, that is extension, yes? It is dorsal surface here. If you move in dorsal surface, that is extension. In plantar surface, that is flexion. And you're right that it is, sometimes it is not so clear that it is extension, it is flexion. That is why frequently speak about dorsal flexion and plantar flexion. But more better to answer that in plantar surface that is flexion, in dorsal surface that is extension. And one important thing, that is a trochlea tali, and you can see that trochlea is wider in front and narrower posteriorly. Anteriorly it is wider and posteriorly it is narrower. That is why in time of flexion, when between malleolus medialis and malleolus lateralis present narrow part of trochlea, in this case is possible to make abduction and abduction in vertical axis. That is why hinge joint, it is uniaxial, and this joint it is uniaxial joint, and main function is flexion and extension in frontal axis. But in position of flexion is possible to make abduction and adduction in vertical axis. Ligaments. First ligament starts from malleolus medialis and goes to talus. That is ligamentum mediale, or another name is ligamentum deltoidum. Two names: medial ligament because it is on medial side, or deltoid because it has deltoid shape, like Greek letter delta. Ligamentum deltoidum. That is one ligament on medial side. And laterally, we have three ligaments laterally. One is between talus and anterior part of malleolus lateralis. That is ligamentum talofibulare anterior. Another ligament posteriorly between talus and fibula, ligamentum talofibulare posterior. And last ligament is between talus and calcaneus bone. That is ligamentum calcaneofibulare. Three ligaments: talofibulare anterior, posterior, and calcaneofibulare. Next joint. One again. Articulatia talocruralis is compound, hinge, uniaxial, but in position of flexion it's biaxial joint. Frontal main is frontal axis extension and flexion, and in position of flexion in vertical axis abduction and adduction. Next joint, it is joint between talus and calcaneus bone. That is articulatio subtalaris. It is simple joint, and it is tight joint. We will not discuss movements in this joint. And very, very strong ligament in this joint, which is occupy space in sinus tarsi. Do you remember?
Yes.
Sulcus thalia and sulcus calcaneae together make sinus tarsi, and this sinus closed with the help of ligament, ligamentum thalia calcanea interossa. Very, very strong ligament. That is why very small volume of movement, limited movement in articulations subtalaris. It is tight joint, and we will not discuss movements here. It is. Next joint. Joint between talus, navicular bone, and small part of calcaneus bone. The same participate in this joint. That is why name of this joint is articulatio talo calcaneo navicularis. Tala calcaneo navicularis. Because three bones here it is. That is why it is compound spheroid, because it has spheroid shape. More better ellipsoid, because yes, it is head of talus, but it has ellipsoid shape, and here it is two axes of movement: flexion, extension, and abduction and adduction. Next joint, it is joint between cuboid bone and calcaneus bone, articulatio calcaneo cuboidea. Articulatio calcaneo cuboidea, it is saddle joint, simple saddle joint, biaxial. Movement the same: flexion, extension, abduction, adduction. And these two joints, articulatio thalia calcanea navicularis and articulatio calcanea cuboidea, together combine into one joint. It is articulatio tarsi transversa, or Chopard's joint. Why two joints combine together? Because very frequently we make operation in this joint if necessary to remove part of the foot in time of gangrena, for example. We can remove part of the foot in this place, and in this case necessary to cut one ligament, that is ligamentum bifurcatum. This ligament consists of two bundles. One starts from calcaneus bone and goes to cuboid, ligamentum calcanea cuboidum, and another bundle starts from calcaneus bone and goes to navicular, ligamentum calcaneo naviculare. Ligamentum calcanea cuboidum and ligamentum calcanea naviculare together makes ligamentum bifurcatum. And in time of operation, if we cut this ligament, in this case we can open both of these joints and remove part of the foot. That is articulatio tarsi transversa. Consists of two joints: articulatio thalia calcanea navicularis and articulatio calcanea cuboidea. That is Chopard's joint. And ligamentum bifurcatum, that is a key of Chopard's joint. Key because if we cut this ligament, we can open this joint. Key of Chopard's joint. Next joint is articulatio cuneo navicularis. Compound ellipsoid joint between navicular bone and three cuneiform bones. And next joint, that is articulatio tarsa metatarsa. Tarsa metatarsal joint. Here it is, we can see three joints. First is between cuboid bone and fourth and fifth metatarsal. Next joint between lateral cuneiform and intermedial cuneiform with second and third metatarsal bone. And last joint between medial cuneiform bone and first metatarsal joint. That is why only this joint is simple, and this joints are compound. cleates. In this joint between cuboid and metatarsal bones, 3 bones participate. In this joint, 4 bones and 2 bones in joint between middle cuneiform and first metatarsal. First is simple, second compound, and third compound. And whole name for all of these 3 joints, Lis-Franz joint. Lis-Franz joint. And key of Lis-Franz joint, that is ligamentum cuneo metatarsa interossa. Ligamentum cuneo metatarsa interossa, that is key of Lis-Franz joint. And if we need to remove part of the foot in this joint between tarsals and metatarsals, it is necessary to cut ligamentum cuneo metatarsa interossa. Next joint, that is a joint between metatarsal and phalangeal bones. Articulatio metatarso phalange. It is, all of them are simple, ellipsoid, and biaxial. Here it is the same possible extension and flexion, and abduction and adduction. But differences from the same joint of the hand, if you remember, abduction from middle finger and adduction to middle finger. Here it is abduction and adduction from second toe. Cleates. And last joints are interphalangeal joints. Articulatio interphalange proximalis and articulatio interphalange distalis. All of them are hinge uniaxial joints. And here it is the same in metatarsophalangeal joint. Necessary to know deep transverse ligament, like here it is ligamentum metatarsum transversum profundum, here it is ligamentum metatarsum, here it is metacarpium, and here it is metatarsum transversum profundum. And last ligament, which also necessary to know, that is ligamentum plantare longum. Long plantar ligament. It starts from tuber calcaneae and goes forward and separates into 5 bundles. It goes to each of metatarsal bone, goes to 5 each of these 5 metatarsal bones. Ligamentum plantare longum, it goes to metatarsal bones, and it's participate in longitudinal arches of the foot. I think you know that foot is not flat. It has arcuate shape, and these longitudinal arches makes the same with the help of ligaments, and one of the most important ligament, that is ligamentum plantare longum. It helps to makes arches of the foot. It is important. Why? Because it's
prevent the foot from going flat.
Yes, it is like spring. That is amortization in time of walking. Yes, that is help to protect of all of these joints and another knee joint, hip joint from the pressure in time of walking, jumping. That is good for our health, for good health of joints. That is arcuate shape of the foot. It has 5 longitudinal arches, start from calcaneus bones and goes to each of these metatarsal, and transverse arc in the region of the bases of metatarsal bones. The same, we have small joints between metatarsal articulatio intermetatarsal joint, like here it is was articulatio intermetacarpal. Do you remember? What you will answer next time, everything about ankle joint, articulatio talocruralis, shape, movements, ligaments, everything, classification. In all another joints, not necessary to answer classification, only names, all of these joints, and main ligaments. One again, only names, we repeat them. Between talus and calcaneus bone, articulatio subtalaris, articulatio talia calcaneo navicularis, and articulatio calcaneo-cuboidea together makes articulatio tarsi transversa. Next joint between navicular and cuneiform bones, articulatio cuneo-navicularis. Next, articulatio tarso-metatarsa. Here it is 3 joints. First between first medial cuneiform and first metatarsal. Second between intermediate and lateral cuboid and second and third metatarsal. And last between cuboid and last 2 metatarsal bones. Next joint is intermetatarsal joint, articulatio intermetatarsa in the region of basis of metatarsal bones. Metatarsophalangeal joint, it is clear, and interphalangeal joint, proximal and distal, that is the same, clear. And main ligaments. Between talus and calcaneus bone, ligamentum talia calcanea interossa. In the region of chopars joint or articulatio tarsi transversa, ligamentum bifurcatum consists of ligamentum calcaneo-cuboidum and ligamentum calcaneo-navicularium. In joint between tarsal and metatarsal bones, that is Lisfranc's joint, here it is ligamentum cuneo-metatarsa interossa. Then ligamentum metatarsum transversum profundum and long plantar ligament, ligamentum plantare longum. These ligaments necessary to know, and only names of joints, not necessary to answer classification. Names of joints and main ligaments. Your questions? Okay.